We left off in the last segment before the interview. We were talking about some of the things that are happening in the Trump administration that I think they may be just getting off center on a little bit. And another one I wanted to bring up is this whole taking the European drug price fixing model and trying to apply it to the United States. Because while it may sound like a good idea that we're going to have ostensibly lower prices imposed by the government, it has some real downsides in terms of the development of new medicines and the like. And just because the Europeans steal medicines doesn't mean that we should. And quite honestly, if we don't reform the world pricing system rather than accepting theirs, we're going to end up in a situation where new medicines aren't going to be brought on the marketplace, and it's going to be to the detriment of everybody. What do you think?
I agree with you 100% on that. I think one of the things you have to realize is that America is paying for the R&D of new medicines for the rest of the world. And then the rest of the world essentially steals our work product and then gives it away at cut rate prices. I would argue that we need to go to these developed countries and just say, we're not going to let you steal our intellectual property. Mm-hmm. You need to be fair and reasonable. We can do this in trade deals. This is one of, I would argue, Donald Trump's strengths. Have that included in the trade deals, and then they help pay for the R&D. Our drug prices are lowered because we're no longer the only country paying for all that R&D. The whole world will be included. And of course, in the developing world where there's tremendous poverty, we have programs that get medicine to needed people irrespective of their ability to pay. But for those who can pay, let's all chip in and pay for the R&D for the next generation of drugs. Otherwise, you're locked into a position where the only drugs you have available to treat disease will be the ones that are currently available.
Or ones that have a mass market appeal. Right. As opposed to ones that have a narrow focus.
Yeah, I'm surprised when I find out that they are actually doing significant research on drugs that, for example, are currently believed to only be necessary for like 2,000 people.
Right,
and they do that, and people don't realize that, but they ought to do a better job of telling people what they're doing, because they do that, and but it costs a lot of money, and then all of a sudden the pill costs a lot because nobody else in the world will help pay for it.
The other thing that could be done, well, first of all, in terms of the trade, Trans-Pacific Partnership actually exempted drugs from intellectual property requirements within it. And as a result, it would have made it so it would have exacerbated the problem in terms of theft of intellectual property. And that's something which Donald Trump fixed in the USMCA, which is the replacement for NAFTA. Medicines are included in terms of the intellectual property provisions. And as a result, if we use that model, we can kind of impose a protection around the world, which will then lower our drug prices. That's the natural impact.
And I think that's a good model, because it lowers drug prices because everyone's paying for them, but it maximizes the innovation that we need for the next generation of new drugs and medicines that will cure cancer and other diseases.
I think that everybody our generation is really aware of the ravages of Alzheimer's, for instance. Yeah. And I would hate to think that a cure for Alzheimer's got put on the shelf because we were busily having drugs stolen from us, intellectual property stolen from us from India. They actually manufacture the drugs in not safe environments and then ship them to us and sell them to us. And we end up buying them because they're cheaper, and we end up, in fact, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of no innovation. So anyway, it's a big problem. It's one that I think we're going to discuss again next week. But I don't want to get too far off track. And by the way, President Trump needs to rethink this whole idea of taking the European model and trying to impose it on America. It's a bad idea. He needs to rethink that. Yeah.